Morena tātou. Welcome to the council meeting of the 30th of October 2024. I'd like to begin the meeting by talking about the housekeeping and safety procedures. Fire and emergency. On hearing the alarm, please leave the site immediately by the nearest fire exit. Evacuate to the assembly area, which is the clock tower, Te Marae o Hine, the square. Health and safety. Smoking and vaping is prohibited within any council public entrance, building or site. A defibrillator is located outside the entrance to customer services on the ground floor, and please report any near-miss incidents to the committee administrator. It's lovely to see everyone here today, and I'm also aware that there will be some people who are online as well. Before we begin the meeting in earnest, I'd like to call upon Councillor Fitzgerald to open with a karakia. Thank you, Councillor.
Tēnā koe te whaia. Aotira tēnā tātou, kua tau mai nei tēnei ata i roto i te whare. Koutou anō kei runga i te matanui no reira me karakia tātou. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tāiki e.
Nei rā te mihi nunui ki a koe mātua. Thank you very much, Councillor Fitzgerald. Just to let you know, you have some additional documentation on your tables. These are additional tabled items with minor edits pertaining to item 7, and also the auditor's opinion, which we received just this morning. Good timing, but it arrived this morning. So that's for your noting. And we'll move on to apologies. We have apologies from Mayor Grant Smith, and also apologies for an early departure from Councillor Hapeta on council business. Do we have any other apologies? Thank you. I'm happy to move those. Councillor Dennison seconds that. Any comment? Can we please vote on that? Thank you. That passed unanimously. Before I begin or go further, I'd like to acknowledge our Administrator, Sarah Claridge, Governance Advisor, also Advisor Hannah White, Manager Governance, and Lead Officer, of course, our CE, Wade Crockett, ngā mihi ki a kōrua, and the Council officers in attendance, SLT and other officers. Moving on, in item number 3, there is a recommendation that Council agree to consider the following late report titled Toitu Te Tiriti Hikoe event, level and nature of Council support for the reasons below. The reason for lateness is the presentation to today's meeting allows for more sufficient planning time rather than publishing in the 6th of November agenda. And the reason for urgency, confirmation of the level and nature of Council support will aid in appropriate planning for the event to be held on the 16th of November. Now, I'm going to move that we accept that late item. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dennison. Any questions or comment? Thank you, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question relates to the other information that's been put on our desk, in particular the auditor's report. And I'm just wondering if we need to accept that as well, if that's a part of what we're approving today.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. I've had advice that that's just a document. However, I realise that none of us have had the opportunity to read it. So I will call a break and thereafter we will discuss that.
Thank you,
To
I'd
give people
appreciate
time
that.
to read
I
that.
think it would be good to be able to read it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Right, so the recommendation is before you as I've read out. If there's no further comment to that, then I'll ask that we please vote on that. Thank you. That has been passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4. And that is, no, declarations of interest.
Just noted, Madam Chair,
Yes.
only 14 votes got captured.
Yes. And there's 15 of us, isn't there? We're going to, we don't need to vote again. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? None being received, we'll move on. There is no public comment. And moving to item 6, confirmation of the minutes. Recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of the 2nd of 2024, Part 1 public, Part 2 confidential, and Part 2B be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to take these all together and also happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dennison. If there's no further questions or comments, we'll go to the vote on that. Thank you. Thank you, and that is passed 13-4 and 2 abstaining. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7. Yes, what we'll do, we're going to adjourn now for 10 minutes, and just so you have an opportunity to read that. By Jove, that's moved quicker than I thought, didn't it? Thank you, everyone. So we'll adjourn for 10 minutes, and we will return at 9:20. Thank you. Kia ora, Council. We're back into our session, and with regards to item number 7, which pertains to the annual report 2023 to 2024, recommendations from the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting of the 23rd of October 2024, which thoroughly discussed the above, the annual report, and this is the committee recommends that Council adopt the annual report 2023-24 and summary annual report 2023 and 2024, that the Council note that assuming audit clearance is given, the final auditor's opinion from Audit New Zealand will be received following expected adoption by Council on the 30th of October 2024 and the Council signing of the reports. 4, that the Chief Executive engage elected members in the process of identifying key achievements for inclusion in annual reports 2025 onwards. 5, that the key achievements in the 2024 annual report be amended to A. Key achievements for Goal 1, page 8, remove reference to Featherston Street. B. Key achievements for Goal 2, page 12, substitute bus launch with highlighting CCO visitor numbers. C. Key achievements for Goal 3, page 15, substitute environmental health contract with completion of Papaioia Place. I'd like to, at this stage, invite our Manager of Finance, Scott Manser, and Auditor Director, Debbie Pereira, to the table. Thank you. Thank you both. And Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you to speak to this. Thank you.
Morena tātou. Really pleased to be back here. Just a very short week after last time, and numerous conversations with our audit team. Just by way of update, to probably talk to the tabled documents and sort of where things have moved since last week. Officers have actioned those changes out of the key amendments for publication. Now, I appreciate that's probably a little bit out of sync given normal process, given that Council hasn't yet agreed those committee resolutions. However, the majority of elected members were present last week, so we've worked on the assumption that those resolutions will be passed for this, and we've updated there. We've done quite a few proofing changes through the document. Since the agenda was published last Thursday, only 24 hours after committee, there's been 4 more than minor changes that we've identified in the table documents. Given we are adopting, we've actually just reproduced those pages in the table documents for you so you can see how they will look in the final document. We've done quite a few other proofing changes. Thank you to the few corrections that were pointed out by a couple of elected members, particularly around a date over some annual plan budget columns. And then we have just this morning received the audit opinion from Debbie and her team, which is great, and I will pass over to her to talk to that before opening up to any further questions.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. So, yeah, I'm pleased to be able to present to you today the audit opinion. I know you've just had a chance to have a review through it, but I can just give you a high-level summary. So our the annual report, as you know, is quite a big document, and it's really sort of split into two halves. One is the financial statements, and one is the statement of financial performance. The statement of financial performance really is probably what engages a reader or helps a reader understand Council's performance during the year. So we give just as much weight to the financials as we do to the non-financials. So this audit opinion gives a clear opinion over the financial statements, which is a really, really good result. And then over the non-financial performance, we've got two qualifications. Well, I call the complaints one qualification because it's basically the same thing, but it does cover 3 areas, which is the wastewater, water, and stormwater complaints. This qualification is one that you've had for a number of years. I'm really pleased to note that systems have changed from April this year, so we can see now that all of the subsequent complaints are captured. Because we've got 9 months within this year recorded in here, we still have the qualification for that. The second qualification, which is new this year, is around the resource consents and the timing of that. For those that were at the Audit and Risk have probably heard this, but just to summarise, with the change from ozone to altitude authority, there has been an issue with the counting, particularly when there's a stop-start, with a resource consent in terms of the timing of when council has actually, the time it's taken to issue the resource consent was coming up different than some of the testing that we did. Council staff have had a look at it, and it's quite a big job to go back and recalculate all the resource consents. So a decision was made that not to do a whole lot of extra work for this last financial year. As a result, we also can't go back and recreate. So usually if there is something we would see, is there any audit work that we could do to avoid a qualification? But it was just as impractical for us as it was for council staff. So, so therefore, we have highlighted in the opinion that we've got a limitation of scope. We can't say that the number you've got in there is incorrect, but we can't verify that it is correct. So we've just highlighted that. At the last, at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, I had also talked about a potential qualification over the complaints, which is also one that has been around for a number of years. Not complaints, sorry, the response times. And this year, when we've stood back, we've looked at it, we've highlighted that probably the complaints are the more material out of those. And so we have excluded that from the audit opinion, and we limited our work around what we did around the response times. But again, council does have a change in system, so we understand that should be fixed for next year. We do also have an emphasis and matter just around the greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a disclosure, and it was one of the disclosures that we got council to put into the annual report. You've had that for a couple of years as well, and that's just really just to highlight that there is some inherent limitations or uncertainties around calculating that, so we just draw your attention to that. But that sort of covers the opinion, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you both, Debbie and Scott, and we do have a number of questions, and invite Councillor Johnson to please begin the questions.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's, as they say at the worst of conferences, it's not really a question, but I will phrase it as a question. So, under citywide admissions at the bottom there, did you mean to have a repeated sentence?
No, we didn't mean to have a duplicate. We'll remove that second sentence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I've got really is just around recommendation 5A. If council decided that we would actually vote against that being included to the annual report, would that mean that the Featherston Street upgrade would be it would be reverted and actually included to the annual report if that were the case?
That's my understanding of how the process works, and we could do that should that occur, because it would be a proofing change that we could do.
Thank you. Signal that I will oppose 5A. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena Korua. Just on page 8 and referring to the complaints for the waters, and it's noted there that the DIA has issued guidance for the application of rules. So is that new guidance, or is that something that we've just been non-compliant with?
Yeah, no, that's not new guidance. It's the guidance that has been around for a while.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was about the inherent uncertainty of calculating greenhouse gas emissions, and whether or not that, whether that's the case for any councils who are trying to quantify that, and what would success look like? Does there need to be a standardised methodology that's accepted across the country, or how do we move past that?
So that is the same emphasis and matter that any entity would have that reports against greenhouse gas emissions. And I think because of the nature of the calculation, there is that uncertainty. I'm not too sure exactly what would change, but perhaps some standardised ways of doing it. But yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's not unique to yourselves anyway.
Yeah, but pretty much anyone who's trying to quantify that and include that is going to have a note going, it's not really an exact science.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Debbie, my questions are around the timing of this report, and on page 6 or the front page of your report, it says that we completed our work on the 30th of October, which is today. I'm just wondering if you could also just acknowledging the meeting that the independent chair and myself had with you last week, and this was something that he raised concern about in terms of the timing and the process for elected members to get their eyes over this report and be able to read it and take it in and ask questions about it. So I'm just wondering why it's so last minute, and also, is there a legal requirement for us to have approved this? Is my understanding correct that there's a legal requirement to approve this today? So yeah, I'm just really interested to know why this is actually not being completed till today and put in front of us today.
Sure. So yeah, there's probably several parts to your question. The first one is around the timing. So council has a statutory deadline of 31st of October, and council must adopt the annual report. So we can't give the opinion before you have adopted it. It does take a little bit of time to also go through the committees and to complete the work. This year in particular has been quite a crunch year for councils and for auditors with the long-term plans, and I think there are still some long-term plans that haven't been signed yet, but usually they would have been all done and completed 30 June, which allows councils to go into their 30 June reporting timeline. So for your case, you were completed, but it just does mean that there is probably the time that we would have been doing the interim work was taken up with long-term plans. So that's why we're at this end of the time frame. One of the things that I do want to engage with council about is looking at how we can actually bring that time frame forward. At the moment across the country, there's a number of councils adopting today, a number are adopting tomorrow, so I think there's very few that have adopted now, but that doesn't stop us in the future from going to a September council meeting or an earlier council meeting, and one of the things will be around infrastructure revaluations. So next year you've got an infrastructure reval, and that often takes quite a bit of time for the revaluation to be done and then for us to audit it. But we don't have, or council doesn't have to do it at 30th of June. They could do it at an earlier time, and then we can audit it outside of the crunch time to allow that to come through. So there's a number of opportunities that we've got to work with council. This year was particularly hard year, and the last few years, the statutory deadline last year was also 31 October, but previous to that it was 31 December, so over the COVID years. So you are a lot further than you were, but we can get closer. And then the other question that you had was around the ability for councillors to have a look at the document and get involved earlier rather than at the end after we've done our work. And we would definitely encourage that, and to put into the timetable a review by council or by the Audit and Risk Committee. So that gives you the chance to have that input.
Thank you. That's helpful to hear that. So just to clarify, did you say that the auditor's report can't be done until council have approved the annual report?
That's right. Basically we do it at the same time as council. So council, because if we were to give our opinion earlier and then we're sitting around the council meeting to adopt it and council wants to change something, it takes away that ability for you to do it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora kouroua. Thank you both for being here again. And just had a question, Debbie, around the climate-related point that you made around the inherent uncertainty. How are other councils around the country disclosing their climate-related performance? Is it through an annual report kind of channel, or are there other ways that that's being done?
There's probably various ways that it is done. Some councils are doing it through the annual report. From what I've seen, there's some that don't do any reporting through the annual report, so they would do it outside of, and then others who have put it as part of their performance targets, like yourselves, where you've got your organisational emissions. So it depends on how it's been structured at the time of the long-term plan. The annual report is one way of doing it, but there could be other ways. Yeah.
Does Audit New Zealand have a view around what good practice is in terms of reporting?
So we haven't taken a stance as to whether we say it's good practice to have it in the annual report or separately, but we do look to see if you have got some targets. It does make sense to have it in your annual report. We do have some clear thoughts on greenwashing and making sure that there's that what's disclosed is accurate, and that there aren't statements that could be misleading. So that's probably
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Harpetang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming back again. Just on the resource consents on page 8, just the commentary is a little bit different to what it was last time. So I just want to clarify what you have written. You have said here, and the point that I'm probably trying to make is that as a result our work was limited and there was no practical audit procedure we could apply to obtain assurance that our reported result of the performance for last year. And so basically, really, is any other council able to do this, or are we the only council that can't report on resource consents?
You're not the only council that can't report, but yes, other councils can do this. And your report last year wasn't qualified. It was only because of the change in system and the time it would take for you to.
We're wholly blaming this on the change of system.
Yes, so there is a system functionality issue that prevents officers from being able to accurately record the time taken to process. Because we can't accurately record that, the audit team can't verify that what we've reported is correct. That's what that sentence is saying, is that the audit team can't check that our workings are accurate. They can't check that our workings are wrong, but they can't check that they're accurate as well. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I would just like to clarify that we are working very, very closely with our vendor to fix that for the current financial year, and officers have implemented additional checks to manually calculate resource consents at the same time.
Just to clarify, is it a process or a system? Because
System.
they step in and out of the process to go into the system, though. Isn't it more of a process?
No, it's a system issue.
Okay.
The clock is not calculating correctly the stop and start times.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry to pop back into the question queue, but I didn't feel I got a clear answer to some of Councillor Naylor's questions. So I'm just going to put them again, maybe in different words, and see if that helps. So, is there any statutory requirement for elected members to have the audit report available to read a certain number of days before adopting it?
There's no statutory requirement that I'm aware of. No.
Okay. What would you consider to be good practice in terms of the amount of time that elected members would have to read an audit report before adopting?
Ideally, it would be tabled when the agenda went out. Yeah, and we had to go through an audit review, and we had to go through two processes to get to this point. So at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting last week, the Opinion Review Committee had met and agreed, but then there's a bit of a process in terms of coming up with the final wording. I draft the wording to begin with, and then they change it. Yeah.
So who are the Audit Review Committee?
So we've got an Audit Review Committee within Audit New Zealand. So our technical team, we have members of the Office of the Auditor General as well.
So to be clear, it's the internal processes of Audit New Zealand that have slowed down the delivery of the report to elected members so that we're only getting it on the day we're adopting it? Or is it something else? I see Scott wanting to hop in.
Yeah, I'm probably just going to help out Debbie here a little bit. It's not just the audit team's thing. There is a number of questions that go backwards and forwards between the team. And in fact, Debbie and I had a phone call at about 5:15 last night to check that we had all the answers. And then Debbie's team has to go through their process. So it's no one's fault, but it is a lengthy process to get to here. And Debbie referenced the long-term plans and the annual reports. The audit team have just gone from adopting our LTP, which we did on the 26th of June, straight into starting the financial audits about 3 weeks later. So in respect to the auditors and their timeframes, they've been working all hours of night to get us to this point. And it is quite a lengthy process to go backwards and forwards between two. Debbie and I would both absolutely love to have this done a week ago, but it's just a matter of ensuring that the audit team are comfortable with the answers that officers have provided through checking, particularly of the non-financial performance measures. That's been one of the biggest ones this year.
So if elected members wanted to have 2 or 3 days to read the audit report, what would have to change?
So that was what I was talking about earlier, about bringing forward a lot of the work, so bringing it out of this time frame. So that when I say the time frame, the July to October time frame, and bringing some of the key areas, which does take a lot of time out, which then means that we can clear them. It means that we would be doing the final, particularly the SSPs, the non-financial performance, in that in the post balance date time. But if we can get a lot of the financials done earlier, then that gives the lead-in time. Also, we can have that in our program, that you will have the opinion, in time for the Audit and Risk Committee to review, which then gives that time for elected members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Given that there are no further questions, I invite Debbie and Scott to return to your seats, and thank you very much. Also, given that this particular item is based on recommendations from the Risk and Assurance Committee from last week, I'd like to invite Councillor Naylor to move. Thank you. Oh, that might help, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations from the Risk and Assurance Committee from the 23rd of October. Specifically, I'll move recommendation 3, 4, 5 and 5, B and C initially, and once we'll follow that with dealing with 5A, and then we can go back to recommendation 2 once the outcome of 5A is determined. Firstly, I would just like to...
Excuse me, councillor, do we have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Dennison.
And
Thank
I'd
you.
just like to make a few comments, if that's okay,
Certainly.
Madam Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to give a huge thanks to staff and to the auditors for the amount of work that's gone into putting this document together. It does highlight a huge amount of work that's happened over the last year. It outlines the highlights, and it outlines how we tracked a budget. And elected members at the beginning of the year did set a specific key focus area in terms of the delivery of the capital program. And I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge that and congratulate the staff for an amazing outcome in terms of the delivery of our capital program. Over 90% is something that I'm not aware of whether that's ever happened before or not, but certainly not in my time or not in the last decade or two, as far as I'm aware. So that's an amazing outcome and goes to the hard work that's been put in by the staff. Last week at the Audit and Risk Committee, I did express some of my own personal concerns around the financial outcomes, and those were specific to decisions that we've made as elected members. They weren't to do with the outcome of what has been agreed by council. So I do want to, in reflection of that, do want to acknowledge that what is in the document is fair and it's accurate. So I also want to acknowledge that the feedback that was given at the committee last week was taken on board by staff, and I can see that there were a number of adjustments made, and I particularly am pleased with the recommendation that was proposed by Councillor Barrett that there is better engagement by elected members prior to this process going forward, and I'm sure that process will look a little bit different. The process and the timing was teased out a little bit through questions. I do have some concerns around this, which I do want to raise, and this is also reflects our committee structure. I'm very much aware that the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee is not present today, and it was the chair and myself who had the opportunity to meet independently with the auditor last week, and that was a useful process where we heard about some of what's in this report verbally. I am concerned that elected members haven't had an adequate chance to take in this information and had an appropriate amount of time to perhaps ask well-informed decisions having read this. Yes, thank you to the Madam Chair that we had 10 minutes to have a quick run over, but this is complex stuff. We employ an independent chair to bring expertise in this area. However, if he's not present for the relevant part of this process, then I feel that there's something inadequate with our structure. I also feel a little bit uneasy about there only being one elected member involved in that process where the chair and myself were able to have that meeting with the independent, with the auditor. And in reflecting on good process, of my understanding of good process, that is something that should be available to all elected members, or at least more than just one elected member. There should be a robust in-committee discussion where any questions can be teased out. So in saying all of that, I don't want that to detract from the fact that we do have a very good annual report here, which I'm happy to recommend. We do meet all the legal requirements, and I don't have a solution. I don't think it's ideal that we have this information today, and we're legally required to have processed this by tomorrow. So let's hope that the process side of things can be ironed out in future. But happy to recommend those, happy to support those recommendations, to move those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, just to support Councillor Naylor's comments around some of the concerns relating to this. I think it is a concern that we have only one elected member involved in the discussions with audit, and I agree with that. And I also think it's a concern that we don't receive the report until actually we're sitting at our desks in the meeting where we have to approve it. I mean, that's just not good process in anybody's book. So try to tease out what needs to be done to change that. I'm not sure we got to the bottom of it, but perhaps staff could note that for future years, because I just don't think it leads to good decision making to have the document in front of you and have to make a vote on it, you know, a few minutes later. I have got some comments about 5A, but we're taking that separately, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Doesn't look like we have any further comments. So with that, we'll move to vote on number 3, that the council note that assuming audit clearance is given, the final auditor's opinion from Audit New Zealand will be received following expected adoption by council on the 30th of October 2024 and council signing of the reports. Number 4, that the chief executive engage elected members in the process of identifying key achievements for inclusion in annual reports 2025 onwards. 5, that the key achievements in the 2024 annual report be amended to B, key achievements for goal 2 on page 12, substitute bus launch with highlight CCO visitor numbers, and C, key achievements for goal 3, page 15, substitute environmental health contract with completion of Papaioia Place. Moved by Councillor Naylor and seconded by Councillor Dennison. I now ask that we go to the vote. Thank you. Thank you. That is passed unanimously. Moving on, we are at 5A. That the key achievements in the 2024 annual report be amended to A, key achievements for goal 1, page 8, remove reference to Featherston Street. And I'm happy to allow Councillor Naylor to speak to this. Thank you, Councillor.
I'm happy to move that recommendation. And so this was discussed last week at Audit and Risk. Acknowledging that going forward, elected members have indicated a desire to have earlier input into identifying what they believe are the key achievements in this document to highlight. This is a document that is owned and endorsed by us as elected members. It is for our community. So we should have the ability to determine what we believe are the key achievements. Featherston Street was one that was identified, and the majority of those present last week agreed that we didn't necessarily see it appropriate, given how controversial and it's been in the community. We wouldn't have chosen it to identify it as a key achievement in our annual report. So for that reason, I'm happy to support this. It wouldn't, going forward, you know, this kind of thing I expect will get identified earlier in the process and ironed out. But we need to, as elected members, we need to be comfortable with the tone and content of the report. So I believe it is appropriate for us to make this adjustment at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just going to state that I actually oppose the recommendation and will not support it. And the reasons I'll give as follows. The purpose of an annual report, of course, is to report on revenue, expenditure, also report on what council has actually done and not done during the previous year. And it's a report back to our constituents and our stakeholders, and it needs to accurately reflect that. sometimes in council and in committees, we do make some perverse decisions, and in this particular case, when Councillor Wood moved this at the Risk and Assurance Committee, of course, there is actually no substitute for Goal 1 from the Feathers Street reference. So deciding to exclude Feathers Street upgrades from the annual report is one of those perverse decisions. Councillor Wood argued that the inclusion of Feathers Street upgrade be removed from the annual report, as it would poke the bear and it would unnecessarily draw attention to council's support for the project. The flip side to that argument is that it just fans the flames of discontent and in some cases flat out misinformation about that particular project. Councillor Wood's endeavours to date have made this an issue that does not really exist. It is out in the public domain because we have deliberately highlighted it. This project, despite vociferous opposition by a few, is worthy of noting in our report, and I'll just go through a few reasons why that is so. Firstly, it represents a significant investment in the safety infrastructure and progress against two of the city's major projects. One of those was our Cycleway Master Plan 2018, and the other one is Piniti. It's integral to both of those particular projects. Primarily, its completion supports the daily safe arrival and departure of some 2,000 students at Palmerston North Boys High School and Central Normal School. It's also about detuning some of our roads to ensure that we've got an integrated and aligned approach taken to vehicle movement across our network. As mentioned before, it is part of the Piniti project. Its inclusion is about noting the need for change. 1997, I moved to Palmerston North, and I think the population was somewhere around 60,000 people. Move forward to 2024, and we're 90,000 plus. When I arrived in Palmerston North, traffic congestion was not a problem. In 2024, it is a serious problem. So some things have to change. We cannot stay the same. If we stay the same and stay the course as we are at the present time without actually making any change, our traffic congestion problems will compound. Removal of this key achievement is tantamount to not owning our decisions. And it wasn't a majority decision about the Feathers Street upgrade. There was a lot of debate about that, and we all didn't agree with it. And this particular one is based on a tenuous interpretation of popularity. There are many in our community who are grateful for the completion of the Featherston Street upgrade. In the following paper, you'll see that road maintenance and safety is a concern of our residents. We must own our collective decisions, and we must also recognise that we cannot please all the people all the time. And if you read the news this morning, a Wellington councillor talked about why they've now got a Crown observer looking over what's happening in Wellington. It's because often they would have a majority decision of a particular issue in the city, and then councillors who didn't agree with it would actually then try and reverse it and actually work very, very hard to actually undermine that decision. Our reporting of key achievements must be authentic and not be influenced by any fear of public backlash. We need to be brave, thanks. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly concur with Councillor Hancock's reflections on the particular project. This was quite a narrow vote at the committee. It was 6-4, the independent chair abstaining. So I think it's quite good to be able to pick this up again at council when we're a bit closer to a full house and have the opportunity to consider what is an annual report actually for. Is it for substance? Is it for spin? I find it quite remarkable that some colleagues have become so allergic that they balk at even seeing the word Featherston in print. So even if you're not a particular fan of this project, the fundamental question here is one around the integrity of our budgeting and reporting process. And a robust annual report is about substance. It's not about spin. Our constituents absolutely deserve a robust report, or a report that fully closes the loop on what we set out to do about 24 months ago, because it's actually a 24-month process when you look at the internal work that's done to develop budgets. Those come through to workshops, those come through to council for an approval of a consultation document that goes out for submissions, comes back for hearings, we approve an annual budget, there's then 12 months of delivery, and then there's 3 months, bar 1 day, of annual reporting on the back end of that. So a 24-month project, and the way you properly close the loop is that you pick up on the major themes that were in the consultation document. You pick up on the major themes that were in the annual budget. And when you look at page 6 of the consultation document, you'll find Featherston Street. So to airbrush this out now would be most inappropriate indeed. It would weaken accountability, it would undermine transparency, and it would set the editorial bar far too low. In a few minutes' time, Madam Chair, we'll be getting a resident survey where it will be reported that distrust outweighs trust. We would do well to reflect on that at council. Distrust outweighs trust. And what is it that erodes trust? Well, I would say it's an 11th hour post-audit twinking out of a major project that you've been wanting to kill since day one but could not get the votes to kill. And therefore would urge colleagues to vote this amendment down so that we can have a robust and solid report with accountability, transparency, and that sets the editorial bar where it needs to be. The community deserves that level of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree wholeheartedly with the last two speakers. I do think this is about the integrity of the annual report. It doesn't matter if you don't personally agree with a project. This project, Featherston Street, was voted on and carried through a majority vote through council. And that's why it happened. Now, you might not have been there. I personally wasn't present when the first vote was there for Featherston Street. You might not have been there. You might not have agreed. But the fact remains that the project was passed by a majority of council, was completed, and now needs to be reported on in the annual report. And I'm surprised, actually, to see the elected members that want to remove this bending to public pressure. Because it's not our job here on council to, do things that we think are the right thing to do things with integrity and honesty. This was a key achievement for council. Yes, there was a vociferous minority that opposed it, but equally, I could point to very many emails and conversations that I've had with people that actually think it's an improvement. So just because a few drums beat loudly and there was a bit of a social media campaign against it, we're now supposed to just pretend it didn't exist? I think that's a wholly dishonest attitude, quite honestly, and I'm not going to be part of it. So I won't be supporting it being removed. And my understanding is if we vote against this, against it being removed, that it will then be reinstated. And honestly, councillors, I know perhaps some of you are thinking about your election chances next year and trying to work out a platform, but I really don't think that this is the way to do it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been some rather bizarre comments made by the last three speakers, who I would like to draw your attention to the wording of the recommendation in front of us. It's not that we remove all mention of Featherston Street from our entire annual report and put our heads in the sand and pretend it never happened. You only have to drive down the street to see that it happened. This is saying that we remove it specifically as a key achievement, not saying we won't talk about it at all, because absolutely it's something we've done in the report, and absolutely it's something we need to report on, and there's no suggestion here that we don't do that. This is about what council as a body and an organisation, sees as its key achievements for the year. That's what we're talking about here. Nothing. So I'd encourage other councillors to disregard a significant amount of what's just been said because it's related to a recommendation that's not in front of us. So the reasons for removing this that I put at the committee, and I accept that there weren't the majority of elected members here, so it's right to bring this back to council so we can have this discussion. One is the unnecessary antagonising of our community when we know, whether you agree with it or not, it has been a highly controversial decision. We know that there was a petition run where around, I think it was 3,000 people didn't support the project and around 300 did. So I'd say that's a fair read of the community, somewhere about 9 in the community to 1 in terms of support versus not support. So it's not a matter of just a few vocal people in the minority. It's about listening to the public and our community. And is it worth us, as a council, saying, you know what, we haven't heard the community, we haven't listened to backlash, and we still think this is one of our key achievements. Frankly, I just think it's tone deaf. It's not a matter of whether you do or don't support this project, or did or didn't support this project. It is a matter, in my mind anyway, of trust in council. How can the community trust us to make good decisions on their behalf when they make it exceptionally clear that the vast majority do not support this project, that we don't listen to them and continue to charge ahead saying that we believe this was a great and key achievement for the city? I just don't think it's worth the fight. I really don't. I don't think that we're buying ourselves anything that's worth it. There's still significant decisions to be made in terms of the future of the project, and that's debates we'll have down the track. But I just, do not see this as worth eroding trust in council further by putting forward a tone-deaf key achievement that would see, I believe, more public backlash than is worth. It's not about ignoring the project, it's not about not reporting on it, it is simply about the achievement. In terms of Councillor Hancock's point around why there wasn't a substitute, it is a good question. In those other two key, under the other 2 goals, there were only 3 achievements there, full stop. So if we removed those 2, there'd only be 2 left. In this goal and under these achievements, there were 4. And so removing 1 still left us with 3. So that's why I didn't propose a substitute in that particular case, and I did in the other 2, because this way we still highlight 3 key achievements in that space. So that's just a technical point around why there wasn't a substitute there. I will have to push back on the suggestion that removing this as a key achievement is going to invite the Commissioners to Palmerston North. I think that is a highly hyperbolic statement to make in the chamber, and I just can't agree with that. You know, this isn't a decision that we are reverting the program or anything like this. This is just about whether or not we highlight it further as a key achievement. So I would say nice try, Councillor Hancock, but I can't say I agree with you. The last thing I would say, and I said this in committee and I do stand by it, is that in the interests of councillors who opposed this, riling up the community further does nothing but add to our support. It does nothing but aggravate the community to the point that they're more frustrated. So if I was being purely political and purely conniving and purely just sitting around waiting for the election, then yeah, leave it in. Bother the community more. Have another uproar, why not? But it's not what I want to do, because I don't think when we see trust in council slipping, it is worth further aggravating people. So this isn't, I'm not trying to be political here, I'm just trying to get us to a point that we have a report that doesn't unnecessarily antagonise our community. So I hope you support it.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did support this as a seconder, but these were the minutes from the committee meeting, but I opposed it at committee and I'm going to oppose it here at council. And for these reasons. I think the example around substance versus spin that Councillor Barrett added is just so apt. And because this is not a sales pitch, this is accountability, a transparent accountability document that highlights the activity goals, and this, no doubt about it, was one of the key activity goals in Goal 1 that was delivered supposedly on budget, on time and everything else. And the public popularity of it is a secondary issue to me. I was certainly not a fan of it. I voted against it throughout. I'm happy to have that on public record. I'm not a fan of the Featherston Street Cycleway project and the inland bus stops. But nevertheless, it has gone through with majority vote, and as I mentioned, it's got delivered and should be highlighted in this accountability document. And so for those reasons, and I think Councillor Wood, the thing I would agree with is the suggestion by Councillor Hancock that we're some way close to Wellington City in our decision making. I just want to probably remove ourselves from that that innuendo because I think round this table I think I've got a high regard for my colleagues, for you all, around the consideration and the viewpoints, why quite vast and quite debated quite fervently. We actually have quite a united and unified way of making our decisions and accept them when they don't go our way. And I think that's a mark of credibility for the city. I think it's an organisational health, actually, of how we conduct ourselves, and actually can be considered, I take a fair amount of pride of that. So I want to emphasise that point rather than all what goes on in Wellington. So those points are made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dennison. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. Chamber, good morning. From word go, I've certainly opposed Featherston Street, and I'll certainly continue to do so. Pot calling the kettle black, to be honest, calling this a key achievement of this council that is spin at its finest, to be honest. I'd rather have the earthquake strengthening at the cemetery listed, to be honest. This just amuses me. I think next month, when this comes back to council, the public voice will be damning against these changes, and it's just a shame that that hadn't come back to us before now. Otherwise, it might change a few views around these tables. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always a treat to spend 30 to 40 minutes talking about Featherston Street. I will repeat my comments from the Risk and Assurance Committee last week, that I truly believe in this instance we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. Whether we include it as a key achievement or we don't accuse it as a key achievement, either way that's spinnable as we're trying to hide something or we're unnecessarily antagonistic. So I don't think you can win it either way. So putting that to one side, I think Councillor Wood is quite right that there are numerous mentions of this Featherston Street project and how it's described at page 11, page 56, 57, 61, 80 and 84. The question of this specific recommendation, though, is will we emphasise it or not as a key aspiration or a key achievement. So it's about the spin, isn't it? For better or worse, the work has been done in accordance with our own master plans. So in terms of accountability and transparency, I think I'm going to change my vote from last week, and I think we put it in. I would be really sad to think that everything in this annual report will distill down to whether or not we think installing a protected cycleway is a key achievement or not, because there's so much more in this report. We've spent so much longer debating this recommendation than we have everything else, when I think that if it's going to be spun, it will be spun, and it won't be spun by us, so we're better off just being straight up. This is what we did. This was something that was in our master plan, and we did it. Let that fall. Thank you. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Zabellan. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm quite clear I didn't vote for Featherston Street, and I am a ratepayer, and I disagree with it. I just want to note the point here, it says key achievements. Me as a ratepayer, and as an elected member voting on it, I don't see it as a key achievement. And I really feel if we're putting out key achievements, we need to all agree that it's a key achievement. Okay, I hear it said that majority this, that, but we're claiming it as a key achievement. I don't see it as a key achievement, okay? And we just go down the road of a couple of other things. Isn't it amazing when the youngest person in the room is the wisest one? Really, really amazing. To compare us with Wellington, I mean, sorry, Councillor Hancock, I just don't see why we're getting compared with Wellington.
Yes.
The point of order is...
Yes, sorry, Councillor Hancock. Thank you.
It's a misrepresentation to say that I've actually compared Palmerston City Council with Wellington. What I was actually referencing is the fact that when we don't agree with something, their councillors have actually deliberately undermined the majority decision of council. That's the point I was making. Thank you.
I uphold your point of order, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lost my trail of thought there, thanks, Pat. It worked. We're not hiding anything. It's in the report, it's quite clear. So we're not hiding nothing, okay? There's nothing at all we intend to hide. And I have to say, and I'll say it quite clearly on this, I'm sorry, Councillor Hancock, I disagree. I think you were comparing us. Thank you.
Councillor Meehan, I've already upheld the point of order and request that you retract that comment. Thank you.
Apologies, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. Now, Councillor Finlay, thank you.
I've never supported anything to do with Featherston Street. I saw it as a problem from day one. We had people right from the very start telling us that it's going to cause congestion, traffic jams and everything else, and they've all been proved right. Don't tell me that there's no congestion at Featherston Street anymore, because there's nothing but congestion. Try coming out of some of the side streets into that traffic. If they won't let you in, you don't get in. It goes right back to Russell Street. And to say that isn't a major achievement of this council is hilarious. It's the biggest notch up we've made. And there's councillors here who want to say, how proud are we of that? Well, I'm not. I'm not that we have caused major upset to our community, and we did it knowing it was going to happen. How on earth can you say that's an achievement? Not in a million years. To me, that's people just too scared to admit that they're wrong.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As one of the members who wasn't here last week, I was really surprised in conversations with colleagues after to hear that it had turned into another attempt to relitigate Featherston Street. That wasn't quite what I was expecting from the annual report. And this recommendation here rather smacks to me of a child with chocolate on its face denying they ate the cake. Putting it, I recognise the comments that have been made that Featherston Street is still in the report, that we're not whitewashing that, it's not being entirely twinked out, to quote Councillor Barrett. But this debate about what is a key achievement, I think, is really quite interesting, and I applaud the additional amendment that went through from Councillor Barrett to get elected members' involvement in that definition. Because to listen to this debate, you'd think that things could only be a key achievement if they received unanimous support all the way through that project. That seems to be what we're saying. If we didn't all agree to it, it can't possibly be a key achievement because some of us didn't agree. But that's not what we do at council. We debate things robustly. People continue, obviously, to hold robust views about projects. We make a decision which will be somewhere between majority and unanimous, and then the staff go away based on that instruction and do the job. And the annual report is giving the feedback on how the jobs that we asked our staff to do went. It's not continuing to have publicised who supported it and who didn't. That ship has sailed. We voted, we made a decision, they did the work, it happened. You might continue to dislike it, people do. But we made the decision, we did the job, and our community are entitled to know what happened with that. So I think all of the arguments that have been made for taking it out can equally be made for keeping it in, and I think that point has been well made by Councillor Zabellin. We're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. So if we're concerned about the trust and confidence of our community, what does it say when we won't report on our own decisions? When we won't say that that is something we asked our staff to do and they did it? It was a big project. It's been hugely controversial. Why would we resile from that now? I'd ask you, colleagues, to have the courage of our collective conviction We voted for this, we did it, and we should report on it.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. And with a right of reply, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There've been some highly emotive, some misleading and some incorrect statements made about this recommendation. I'd just like to say this recommendation does not seek to reverse any decisions. It does not undermine those decisions. And it does not weaken the integrity of our budgeting or reporting process. There is no content in the substantive part of the annual report that has changed through this recommendation, particularly for those members who weren't at the meeting last week. I do want to draw your attention to the attachment to this meeting, page 11. That is the page, it's page 8 of the summary document. So this recommendation is just about the summary document. There are many, many controversial decisions that were made through a majority decision of council that are not highlighted in the summary document, and some I can't even see highlighted in the large document. Just to name a few, are we reducing transparency because we haven't highlighted the purchase of St Mark's? You know, are we compromising our transparency because we haven't highlighted investment in the arena? No. What we're suggesting is, do we want to highlight this as a key achievement? There are 3 key achievements in Goal 1 identified in the summary document. This was a 4th. There are 3 key achievements in a number of the others, and you know, there is a number of key achievements. These key achievements do not reflect the majority of the decisions made by this council. They are simply a smattering of a few. So this is not about spin. This is a decision that provoked and upset and angered many of people in our community. This is about us making a decision. Do we want to provoke that further or aggravate that further? Or do we, as a collective group, identify this as a key achievement? Personally, I don't identify it as a key achievement. Personally, I am interested in transparency. As for last week, I was interested in a lot more transparency about the size of our debt and how much that had grown in the last year. That may not have been the shared view of all of you. I didn't move a motion to try and have that made more obvious. I think we just really need to recognise what this is. It's been overstated by some members. I think, as I said, if we had earlier engagement, we would be able to sift things out like this earlier. If we support this today, that does not weaken the transparency, it does not weaken accountability, it does not weaken the integrity of the budgeting or reporting process. It simply lets us be the decision makers about what we believe are the key achievements.
Thank you, Councillor. And that brings our comments to a conclusion on this particular item. So we're going to put to the vote, and I invite you to vote on this. Thank you. Number 5, that the key achievements in the 2024 annual report be amended to key achievements for Goal 1, page 8, remove reference to Featherston Street. Moved by Councillor Naylor and seconded by Councillor Dennison. Kia ora. And that has lost 9 votes against and 6 for. Moving on to the last section of this item, that the Council adopt the annual report 2023 to 24, summary of annual report as amended. Moved by Councillor Naylor and seconded by Councillor Dennison. Any final comments? Thank you. If we could vote on that, please. And that is passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, I invite Kian Lee to the table. Thank you, Kian. Thank you, Kian, and welcome. This is pertaining to the results of the 2024 Residents Survey. The recommendation is that the council note the results of the 2024 Residents Survey. Over to you. Thank you, Kian.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. The annual resident survey 2023-2024 gathered views and opinions of council and its services. It is an independent survey carried out by Key Research based on random sampling of residents of Palmerston North City using our latest electoral roll. The results represent opinions of 514 residents gathered over, the information was gathered over 4 quarters of the last financial year. And on 16 October, Michael Hooker, the managing director of Key Research, came to give the elected members a briefing, followed by a Q&A session. And there was one question that needed further clarification, and which is what I will clarify now. I've confirmed with Key Research that the previous survey had used the ward boundaries of 2013. So there was a discussion, and I've clarified this. They've used the ward boundaries of 2013 consistently over the 6 surveys that they've done for us. And as a response to that, we have requested, and they have provided a map of the ward boundaries together with a list of the current statistical area that are covered, so that it is clear which are the boundaries pertaining to that data. So, and that page is in the new report, which will be, as proposed, to be made available in the website. I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, and if I can't, then I'll seek further clarification from Key Research. Thank you.
Thank you, Kian. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Kian. In discussion last week, I asked a question about whether or not it was possible for a small number of people's views to be magnified and overrepresented in the survey. And I particularly gave the example of the youngest age group, where there were the fewest respondents. But then my understanding was that the methodology of the research company was then to multiply those answers up so that the youngest age group weighted in direct proportion to the percentage of the population. And would you like to just give an answer as to whether or not you think that that is a risk with this type of methodology? I know that the research company felt it wasn't a risk, but I'd be keen to hear your view as well.
Thank you for the question. I have gone back to do my homework, and I agree with what the consultant has said, because they have used a weighting of 1.7 because they have collected 10%. 10% of the responses from the survey was from the age group 18 to 24, whereas the population was 17%. So they had to weight the 10% to become 17% by having a weight of 1.7. And I've checked that it is within standard practice to weight from 1 to 0.5 and 1 to 2. So 1.7 is within the standard range that would not jeopardize the results, and it is a standard practice. So and you have picked up the strongest case, the strongest weighting of that. So then there was no other that fell within that range. So I'm happy that they have used the proper weight for that.
Okay, thank you for that, just to clarify. The other thing that we have presented to us that I don't see in the council paper is the general trend across local authorities in New Zealand.
You are right. There was a separate report, and in Michael Hooker's presentation, he has brought that in because that was made available to us on sometime in September. So when he came to present in October, that was made available to us. We have that report. We have paid for that report that compares us with other councils, about 16 or 17 councils.
So is that report available to the public?
That can be made available to the public. That has not previously been made available to the public, but we have the data going back as well, as far as I'm aware. And yeah.
So there's no reason why that couldn't be made public as well?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Would you like to just do a kind of a brief summary of how we compare to other councils?
In most of the indicators, we tend to be performing better than average, but there are a few that we could be scoring slightly below.
And in terms of overall satisfaction rating, what has been the trend amongst local authorities over the last few years?
There has been a marked drop, consistently dropped post-COVID across the local authorities that was included in the survey, the group of surveys that we have done that we can compare with, and there's been consistently a trend moving downwards.
Okay,
but it has, sorry, if I may add, it has stabilized over the last 3 years. So there has been a shift down,
yeah,
and then it has stabilized.
And is your interpretation of that as regards our council that we're doing significantly better or significantly worse than any other council?
Not. It is not clear that we are any worse, but I think we are in slightly above average.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Kian. I've just got a few questions which are just fairly specific, I guess. Just the first one is just in terms of overall satisfaction with facilities and infrastructure services. The report tells us that Māori are least likely to be satisfied. Can you tell us any more information about that, or how that perhaps can be better understood?
I'm afraid I don't have the answer for that. The report allows us to drill down to a certain demographic, and that is just showing up as they tend not to be satisfied. I cannot explain. It is not in the report to explain that either, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. That's understood. So between now and June, there'll be an action plan prepared, is my understanding from the paper. So, say for example, if we use dissatisfaction by Māori as an increasing risk, what would we propose to do between now and June to try and actually understand that, to perhaps change that result, turn that result around?
If I may share my understanding of how we are moving forward with the data, for this financial year, we will be using data from the resident survey as part of our non-financial reporting. It is reported at the citywide level. I'm not aware that we are targeting a specific demographic group at this stage, so I'm not able to answer how that's going to unfold. I'm not aware that there is a specific task or specific program to address, the specific.
Yeah, thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Page 41, 5 of the 8 comments there relate to safety in our city. So people are obviously a little bit concerned about safety in the city, particularly the CBD. So do we share that information with partner agencies in a formal way, or how do we bring stakeholders into that conversation?
That's a great question. I can't answer that.
Okay, and I guess similarly, the wards of Papaoa and Takaro also rate council significantly more poorly than other wards in the city. Again, will we do any work to try and figure out what's actually driving that level of dissatisfaction?
I think because we have shared the results to respective managers and officers, they will be reading through the verbatim comments to be able to address the issues that could be related to all these different wards, mainly because some of the verbatim comments are not anything that is new as well. Some of the officers already know some of the issues, so I leave it up to their best judgment to see what are the actions that they could take moving forward in the respective locations.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. I'd like to offer the opportunity now to David Murphy, our General Manager of Strategic Planning, for his input on that previous discussion. Thank you.
Just through you, Madam Chair. To be honest, since I sort of put my hand up, I think Kian's answered the questions. I guess what I just really encourage elected members to think about is, this is macro level information that should be used to inform a wide range of planning, budgeting, decision making work of officers. So the more we can make the information available to external agencies, partners that we're working with, officers working on projects, ultimately, our LTP and our annual budgets are the key decision-making processes for making changes to activities. But as I said, ultimately this is a macro-level information that will inform a wide range of direction-setting, budgeting decisions by the council.
Thank you, David. Have you finished, Councillor?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I might have a brief comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned in your introductory comments that the map was going to be included in this report. I've just had a brief flick through to check and I can't see it there. I was just wondering where the map's been included.
The maps will be included in the revised report that will be made available in the website. So I'm happy to share the map.
That's fine. I probably don't need to see. I was just interested where it was going to be.
Yes.
There's repeated commentary through this report of people in our community saying they aren't satisfied with the way that we engage with them. Do we ask people in this report how they would like us to engage with them? So I feel like we do a lot and people don't take us up on it. So when we've got a captive audience, do we ask them?
Yes, there is an open-ended reply for that section where there is verbatim comments coming through. Thanks, Liv. So we would be able to capture the data where they are offered by the respondents. So I also like to share that this survey captures quite a lot of data from over 70 questions. So it can be quite a lot to process, but it will be processed by the respective officers moving forward in terms of what they can do to address the issues that were raised.
Thank you, and welcome Olivia to the table. I'm sure you want to make a comment in here.
Yeah, good morning. I guess this is a conversation Kian and I have had a bit over the last few weeks, and I guess I and my team were equally confused about there's a specific question like ease of having your say, for example, and we're like, well, other than door knocking and texting, we pretty much offer as much opportunities as we can. So how do we deep dive into the verbatim comments? But also we've talked about when we do consultations to ask how they're starting to add a question on all consultations and feedback about how did you find out about this, so we can start to see some trends, or did you find out in a different way? So how I guess we're going to try and use some of the data to see how we can make some minor improvements to help shape some of our decisions.
Awesome, glad you're already onto it. Just a question about the margin of error by demographics on page 81 or 55. To your understanding, is that to a 95% or 99% confidence level that we're measuring it to?
95%.
95. And so, in terms of Councillor Johnson's question, that I quite agree with her, the age demographic of 18 to 24 has a margin of error of almost 14%, so a confidence spread of 24%, and that's been effectively increased in its weighting by 70% in terms of our final report. I appreciate you explaining the methodology of how it's happened, and I understand the methodology. I'm interested in your view as to why that is appropriate. I'm sure it is, I don't understand why.
I think it was also raised in the Q&A on 16th October. So my understanding is this. We are actually looking at the population of Palmerston North, and we have got 514 samples, and that is sufficient, according to key research and also in my opinion, to be able to form, a 95% confidence level, the satisfaction level for all or most of the questions, for all of the questions in the survey. So as a whole, taken as a whole, it has about 4% of margin error for the whole total sample. Of course, if we were to break to a smaller subsample, of which we have, the margin error would definitely increase. That's just how margin of error is calculated. The less number of samples, the higher the margin of error. But because we are taking most of the time the overall satisfaction level for the whole city, it's actually just 4% plus minus. And that is what we want to do most of the time. And it was also explained that, and I was actually quite grateful for Michael Hooker for saying it. If we wanted to increase the sample, we would probably be getting the same or more or less the same response. And in terms of value for money, there's really no point doing it. And I kind of understand that if I'm a businessman, I would also want to sell that, hey, you need to do more. But that's not. I think there's a certain integrity there to say that, your sample size is sufficient. There's really no point having more money to do more because the results will be more or less the same. Thank you.
Appreciate the answer. And my final question, there's a discrepancy in statistics which is quite significant between page 40 and page 35 that I want to dig into a bit. So there's a perception that Palmerston North's great for cycling, that 56% of the city either agree or strongly agree. But then there's a trend in satisfaction on page 35 that only 36% of the city are satisfied with cycling in the city. That's a significant difference in those two statistics that to me seem to be measuring the same thing. So it raises a question in my mind of the methodology we use, and there'll be other statistics with similar discrepancies. I just want to understand when officers see significant discrepancies like that in what appears to be measuring the same thing, whether that causes pause for reviewing the way we ask questions or how we ask questions, or do you have any concern or idea as to why there would be such a significant difference on those two measures, which by all accounts are doing the same thing? Yeah, I'm a bit overwhelmed. That's all right. Your microphone's not on.
I'm a bit overwhelmed with too many questions here, the 70 over questions. And I think one is that question, Palmerston North is great for cycling. That's a perception question.
Yes.
It's a perception question. And then the other one was a satisfaction question, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think that is the main difference. One is about the perception and one is how satisfied are you. So I think we have got a group of questions, which is Palmerston North is great for walking, has got lots of opportunities, and that's overall perception of Palmerston North. And the other one is the satisfaction. Can you, I don't have the question at hand. Can you repeat the question about the satisfaction question again? How was that worded?
So perception rates are 56% and satisfaction, it just says cycling in the city 36%. So I'm just trying to understand,
Yeah, and that could be the satisfaction. And that question would have come in from, the infrastructure for road, footpaths, lighting and parking. That is a question that has asked for satisfaction level cycling in the city. It is grouped together with footpath, street lighting, availability of parking and cycling in the city. So those are two different questions. One is a perception, one is satisfaction. That's what I can say for now. I can't explain why there is a disparity.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. My questions are on page 5 of your report, or our page 31 of our agenda. Under the key findings, the second paragraph talks about the value for money being the greatest influence on residents' overall satisfaction. And it's got in brackets there 65%. And then it goes on to say that that's declined from 40 down to 40%. But I'm just trying to understand what the 65% relates to. That it's included after the value for money. Mike.
The 65%, let me get my slides up. Yes. In the model, it's possible to find out what drives the results. So we are saying that the overall performance is 45%. And out of this 45%, how are we going to break down how they have answered, how the respondents have answered, the overall performance of the city, what was it driven by? So for last year, it is 65% weightage or relationship with how they have answered value for money. And then 28% is related to how we have responded for reputation, and 7% our services and facility. And all of that adds up to 100, because we are trying to understand, in terms of overall performance, what is driving the response? What is driving the satisfaction level? So while value for money weight, in a way, I've used the word weight, is easier, 65% weighted. The performance for value for money is 40%. So our satisfaction for value for money is 40%. Our reputation, our performance of satisfaction is 44%, and the weightage is 28%. And services and facilities, we have performance is the high, 63%, but the weightage is only 7%. So in terms of how the residents are scoring our overall performance, value for money is coming up tops. And it is not a surprise given the economic conditions that we are facing. And that sort of tells the overall story, and that doesn't, yeah.
Thank you. And just further to the similar point, the top three concerns or priorities that are under that paragraph, the second and third one seem to be quite closely related. The second one being the sensible spending decisions or spending money wisely, and then the rates too high, or people not wanting the rates. Obviously, that's a cause and effect, a similar issue. How is it? And I mean, both of them together would add up to 39%. How is it determined, those categories, and also how does that compare to the last time this survey was done?
The report doesn't compare it to last time. I would have to pull out the report from previously, because I think we are trying to focus on what happened last year and to try to address moving forward. And the top three concerns are basically coded from all of the comments on overall performance and recommendations the respondents would give to the council. So they are coded, which means that the verbatim comments are grouped into a few headings, and the headings are related to roading maintenance, which is the first one. The second one is make sensible spending decisions, and rates are too high. Those are the top three of the coded answers from the verbatim comments.
Okay, Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ken. So my first question is, what sort of research do you think would be helpful for us if we wanted to explore some of the areas where there's quite inherent tension? So like we have a message coming through that people want low rates, and we have a message coming through that people want more transport infrastructure. What kind of research would help us explore those tensions in terms of potential solutions?
I would have to think about it and come back to you.
What form might that coming back to us take?
Because you're talking about research. I'm trying to understand the question. You're trying to understand research to come up with a solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we have already built in that in our council processes. We have built that in already, isn't it? With consultation, we could add perhaps a focus group discussion to talk about how we want to do. And we have also tried to address some of this in our plans and strategies already. So we would have captured all of the plans moving forward. It's just, if you want to address the dissatisfaction, I'm not sure if the survey allows us to do that. One of the things about the survey, it's random. So it captures all of the different views of the resident. And it is random in such a way that if you were to pick, and if it's randomly sampled, it would be more or less the same with another random sample of 514. So it is that random and is that robust. If you want to know about specific detail, about specific aspects of transportation, then you need to have a special task force or a special group to be able to pick the respective, things that you want to address.
Thank you. Before we move any further on that, I'd like to ask comment from David Murphy, our General Manager of Strategic Planning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just add to Kian's answer a couple of things. The first one was during the course of the LTP, we considered there was a discussion and there was a budget put up to fund focus groups to support the, which was actually a service offered by Care Research. So that's one thing the council may want to consider moving forward. The budget for the focus groups was not supported through the LTP process, but it's not to say that it couldn't be considered again in the future. The second thing is, there is a broader digital customer experience piece of work that's being advanced through the organisation. Part of that is about looking at how we can have enhanced opportunities for community voice to come through to inform the work that we do on behalf of the community. So that's a work in progress, but there's certainly other opportunities that, and certainly if elected members have views about the way in which we could do that, then we can think about that moving forward as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's me for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Lee. I'm interested to know why, please, on page 31, when we're talking about key findings, in the priorities, nowhere on this page is safety or lack of city safety, to be honest, mentioned anywhere at all. Why would that be, please? When so many residents have brought it up.
I believe it is how things are ranked, because if you will look at the three priorities that we've just talked about just now, it was roading and finance and rates. It's the way that it is ranked. We are not saying that they are not important. The data is there. We can track the perception of how people feel whether Palmerston North is a safe city or not. The information is there. It is up to us to see who is looking at that and who will be addressing it. And that does not quite come up in the survey as a key issue, either in terms of the change, in terms of significant change from last year. So it's not, and in terms of, overall how it ranked. I mean, we have the data for safety, and we can pull that out. So it is just not ranked the top 3. If you were to search for safety, there's an improved safety of roads, and then road maintenance and safety as well. You're talking about safety?
I'm talking about city safety.
Crime. You're talking about crime.
Yes.
Okay, let's have a look. So, the page now.
On page 38, it's listed down as 1%.
So it's down 1%?
Mm.
That's probably why.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question just from Councillor Arnott, is that if the survey is based on, well, this report's based on the input from the survey, is that correct? So if crime is down, it's just something that might not have come up strongly through the survey respondents as opposed to a direct omission on our part? Right, thank you. My other question is, from last year's resident survey report, we had an action plan report come back, and one of those actions was the What Does Council Do media campaign, and I was wondering whether or not we've seen results from that, and whether that, in your opinion, or either of your opinion, has come through in this year's report as shifting that dial at all.
Yeah, so we ran that campaign towards the end of last year and just prior to the LTP to try and start raising awareness. I think based on the shared data, we can see that a lot of people engaged with the campaign. I think what we've been looking at is that what we think we might do this time is looking at those verbatim comments, seeing where there's some similarities and trying to target some specific areas. So rather than doing a big whole citywide campaign on something specific, saying, okay, well, like 20 people have raised this specific thing, so how do we provide some more information on that and do that across the board on a range of different areas? Sometimes, yeah, I guess the people who want to be engaged are generally the people who will be engaged, and you know, like that's always a tricky thing. So I think it's we always talk about that you've always got to communicate in multiple ways to get something across. But we also know that with customer service, and what David referred to, is that the best way we can improve our reputation is through that customer experience stuff. But yeah, and with the election campaign, we'll be doing more about the What Council does stuff too.
So that sounds like through that campaign we might have inadvertently gathered quite a lot of extra data that informs this to help us navigate it for the next survey.
Yes, definitely. And I guess one of the, kind of key parts that we found really good was that especially like younger people in the schools really got engaged in that. So that was like a new demographic, I think, that we saw. So from our website data, for example, we saw that the biggest growth audience in our website over that period were people aged between 18 and 35, which is quite uncommon. So typically it skews a lot older. It varies on certain times, but yeah, so we did see a shift in that. So that's like helpful for us to see how different people like to be communicated with. Yeah.
And I think that segues to my final question, which was about social media and Facebook, which is mentioned some in this report and some verbatim comments, and then just in communications generally, and whether or not our social media is performing, I guess, well at engaging with the residents who do engage on that forum, whether we're seeing an uplift there or a downturn. Is there any change in that trends that comes through?
No, we consistently are the most engaged council Facebook in New Zealand. I guess we are trying to look at other opportunities too. So we've been updating our strategy to look at how we use Instagram, LinkedIn and TikTok a bit more. Yeah, in terms of Facebook, when you look at how many people in Palmerston North have Facebook, we've pretty much captured most of the people who can be on Facebook and choose to be on Facebook do follow our page. So looking at how we use those other channels to also try and draw in different audiences, because as the platforms change their algorithms, and you will have known this from your personal lives, people are dipping in and out of different platforms or are choosing not to use certain parts of it. So how do we change our strategy to make sure that we utilise all the new features and the different trends of how people are using them?
Yes, Kian?
Madam Chair, I would like to put, if I could comment or reply to Councillor Arnott's question again. I've found the relevant pages about safety. Just backtrack a little bit.
In the spirit of something good, yes, I'll allow that.
Thank you. And you know, I'm reading through the comments now, and the report is structured in such a way that there is, you know, for the perception, there's about 20 over questions. And here I'd like to read out to you the general comments related to related to safety. So in terms of the verbatim comments, it was coded right. Great place to live, bracket, safe, clean, family friendly, and multicultural, 30%. 30% of the verbatim comments came back with something positive. But, and then in the light of, there are some discrepancy, or, you know, people have different views, right? So we have got 20%, some areas, unsafe and dangerous, stroke, more visible police presence. So obviously, you cannot get a uniform answer. There are certain places that needs to be addressed, and it is captured here. The respective officers would then need to be able to pick this up to see where they are, and I suspect they already know where the unsafe areas are. I'm sure the activities would have been planned for that, but it's just good to be able to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kian. And Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick question to Liv, actually. I see that Local Government New Zealand has been running a social media campaign about government passing on costs to local councils and how that affects rates. Do we ever tap into those more national campaigns, say that Local Government New Zealand might be running, so that I guess people can see a bigger picture than just our council?
Yes, from time to time we do. You might remember during the LTP we used some of their content in like our sector sessions and things. I think, yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're looking at, is how do we build that kind of thing into our wider comms strategy. We know that our community, and you will have seen this as well, when people talked about our rates rise, a lot of them piped up and said, oh, it's not as bad as other places, you know, so that kind of data you could see was actually getting through to the public as well. I guess on the counter, I would just say that it will also likely get the people who will just say, you know, negative things regardless. So yes, we can use it, but, you know, we'll get the mixed bag results, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose I was thinking more just in terms of informing people rather than trying to sway opinion. Yeah. But just looking at the resident survey and seeing that, you know, rates is a significant concern for people, I was just reflecting and wondering how many people are actually aware of the increasing consequences, I suppose, of government decisions on local government. I mean, I think Auckland Transport were in the news recently with the millions of dollars that it was going to cost them to change all their speed signs. So things like that, do we, you know, consider going bigger than just our council and taking a big picture view?
Yes, and I think we should and can do more of that. And I guess I think Glenn referred to it with the transport funding, and I think you also raised it, like how do we actually like explain that better to the public? Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council. It looks like Kian and Olivia, you are free to return to your seats, and thank you very much for your responses, and we appreciate that. Thank you. So, Council, I'm prepared to move the recommendation that council note the results of the 2024 resident survey, and that is seconded by, thank you, councillor Innocent. And now move into comments. I'll save my comment till last, I think. Councillor Hancock, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, just a very, very brief comment. And thank you, Kian, for the report. It really, I think, gave us a really good, rich understanding, I think, of things that people perceive as being good and perhaps not so good across the city. Yeah, I think the report actually really identifies some significant issues, particularly through my questioning, what's actually going on in Papaioia Ward and also Takara Ward, and perhaps a deeper dive in terms of understanding perhaps what's driving sort of a dissatisfaction or growing dissatisfaction amongst Māori residents is something which we perhaps might want to consider further. It speaks to the well-being of our communities, both by demographics and also by locality. I'm just really interested in finding out how can we actually make good on what we know and what this report actually tells us, and how do we formally actually share that information with other key stakeholders in the community, because council may not necessarily have an overview or some leverage on some of the issues which are raised, particularly, and has been pointed out, around the safety in the city. You know, we're not the only stakeholder in the game, so sharing that information across other stakeholders, I think, would be valuable going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My heart skipped a beat when I read on page 76 my name. Well, I think it's about me. Some councillors reach out to residents. Mark Abbott does a very good job with communication. Thank you to whoever that was, but apart from my last name being wrong, I couldn't have written that better myself.
Rob, you did.
Look, all jokes aside, I found this a bit of a sobering read, to be honest. And, you know, don't get me wrong, there's a heck of a lot of good here, but I think the bad far outweighs the good in my eyes. Percentage drops I find alarming, and, you know, everybody in this room should. You know, particularly disappointing to see in the last 2 years the drop while we've been in this room. About the only thing I'm not feeling thankful for, Councillor Hancock, is that I'm not in Wellington. It was interesting to read on 69 that the mayor and councillors need to be more out there and in communities doing events. I think our mayor does more than his fair share, but I think we around this table could probably do better. But like I said, it's not all bad. And when you read comments like Palmerston North is the greatest and the most wonderful city to raise kids in, you know, those give me hope. You know, key notes from residents were rates, dissatisfaction, roads, potholes, infrastructure replacements are fabulous. You know, more rubbish removal, litter, roaming and noisy dogs, lack of car parks, lack of direction. Our front-facing staff are fantastic. And all this plainly screaming out to me is the lack of safety in our CBD. I know there's a heck of a lot of retailers around the city right here, right now, feeling distraught and not feeling safe, and I get emails almost every second day, as I'm sure Councillor Hancock does too.
Excuse me, Councillor. Earlier you made a comment pertaining to Councillor Hancock that I think was inappropriate, given that it wasn't relevant to this particular section. So I'd like you to, I'm cautioning you to be careful. Thank you about that.
Appreciate that. I'd just like to let everybody know that a couple of days ago, outside the ANZ Bank on Cuba Street, an elderly man, 78 years old, was knocked to the ground after he wouldn't give money to a beggar. So, you know, the homeless situation is getting out of control, I think, and I think, you know, we need to do better in this city. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. not seeking to comment on this recommendation as such, but just wanted to draw elected members' attention to an additional recommendation, which I intend to bring to the chamber with the support of Councillor Bowen seconding it, which hopefully can get to screen reasonably soon. Thank you. That council refer a budget for focus group research to the annual budget 2026 process. So the rationale around this is fairly simple to me, but I'll try to go through it, and I will acknowledge that you've got the scientists standing up saying we need to do more research. So there might be skepticism around the table, but I'd say about half of the questions that we've spent the last half hour asking have been exploring the boundaries and the limits and the weaknesses within the survey methodology. And to me, I continue to question whether or not the survey gives us enough. The survey definitely helps us see some problems. I'm not sure it helps us too much in terms of really exploring those problems in a conversation-based and two-way process with the community around what might be some of the solutions, what might actually help resolve some of those inherent tensions that we see coming through here. I think, you know, certainly myself and I expect many of you would have hoped that things falling quite quickly and quite far after COVID around trust, around leadership, around engagement, around satisfaction would have been something temporary and that we would be on our way back now. The numbers tell us that we may not be on our way back, and I think it's actually prudent that we at least give ourselves scope within the annual budget process to consider whether we would want to include some focus group research in that. So this is not funding that, it's just ensuring that we have an opportunity to include it at the discussion. You know, it's been interesting to observe, I suppose, you know, the kind of research that we tend to do on our own and bring into the chamber, which tends to be quite selective, let's say, sometimes a little bit loaded, sometimes a little bit perhaps less than a full, balanced, unemotive perspective of what actually is out there in the community. And so I think rather than charging ourselves with getting out there and doing a lot more listening, which, okay, we could do, I think some focus group research that is actually arm's length from us and not subject to the kind of interests that elected members might inject into those conversations could be quite helpful to explore some of the opportunities and some of the real challenges in front of us. I'm deeply concerned when I see a survey result that tells us we have more distrust than trust in the community. I'm deeply concerned because I know how hard everyone around this table works. I know how hard the chief executive and his amazing team work to see some of these results. And I think we need to move beyond a simple passive survey mode and into something that is able to better explore solutions. So I'd urge colleagues to support the second recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We could call this Councillor Wood has his annual rant about demographic data as not being reliable, so I'll do it very briefly because you've all heard it before. I completely appreciate that the overall trends in this report have a low margin of error. Completely appreciate that and agree with that. And the overall trends of this show, I can have a lot of confidence in. But every year we report demographic data with very low confidence levels. General statistical practice would say that a 4 to 8% margin of error is generally the range of acceptable margin of error. Almost all of our demographic margins of errors lie outside of that. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing, it just is what it is. Officers have quite rightly said, the less people you have, the more you drill down into the data, the lower your confidence is going to be. And so the concern I have now is that Councillor Hancock, for example, is rightly concerned what's going on in Papaoia, why is there such a lower level of confidence there and trust in our council than other areas of the city. But what we don't know is that for the village and rural satisfaction, for example, that has an 11% margin of error spread. So that means the village and rural actual statistic might be only a 33% confidence level, or it could be a 55% confidence level. We don't actually know. And so my concern is if we get given data, we are, I believe anyway, morally required to act on it and dig into the reasons of why something is or isn't performing as well. And so if we can't trust the data, which in my opinion we can't, not due to any reason other than the fact we haven't surveyed enough people in those areas, then a recommendation like Councillor Barrett's I think sounds quite sensible. So I'm quite open to supporting that because really the confidence, the margin of error levels that we have in this demographic data just isn't high enough for me to have confidence in it. So if we can do something else, either we survey more people and we get more demographic data, or perhaps we have a two-way conversation with people through a focus group program. I'm interested as to where that go and what it would look like, so I'm happy to support that second recommendation. But yeah, I would just say again, it is not a concern with overall confidence, it is a concern with the demographic data, and I would rather, if we're not going to get good data, that we just don't report it. Either we get good data or we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Agree with Councillor Barrett and happy to support his additional recommendation. Also agree with Councillor Wood. It's one of the concerns I've had about this survey for some time. But anyway, taking a bigger picture view, and it's a bigger picture view that I think we need to be approaching this survey with. Our council doesn't operate in a vacuum. We are operating within a national context and within a society-wide context. And so I do wonder how much ability we have to influence some of these results when I see that every other council across the country has got similar results. So I know we're taking this seriously and we're trying to think how we can improve all of the time, and that's right and the correct thing to do. But I would just ask you to just take a higher view of things and understand that this is part of a society-wide trend across the country. The lack of trust in institutions that has happened post-COVID. It's not just our council. And so we just need to understand that and not, I guess, understand there's only so much we can influence by things that we change here. So that's the first point. The second point is there was a lot of concern in the survey, and rightly so, about rates and costs going up. And certainly that also is a reflection of national concerns. But I do think we've got the opportunity as a council to inform our residents a little bit more about the countrywide picture. I mean, just off the top of my head here, while I was waiting to speak, I've listed, 4 unfunded mandates that are coming our way: earthquake strengthening, reversal of the speed limits and associated signage, local water and well, loss of transport funding, and so on. Those are central government decisions to put costs onto local councils and local ratepayers, and that is not really, I don't think, well understood in the community. So whilst I'm happy to take responsibility for decisions we make about our own spending, I'm not really happy to have to be putting transferred costs onto residents and them not understand that that's a government proposal. So let's be clear about what we can influence, what we can't influence, and where we sit in the sort of bigger ecosystem of governance in this country. Happy to support focus groups, absolutely, depending on what the budget is, of course. But at the same time, I think let's be clear about our sphere of influence and what is also affecting what we do. And just as a final comment, because I really did feel it was a little harsh, I just encounter balance to some of Councillor Arnott's comments. Would like to say that I think as a bunch of elected members, we are very well engaged attending community events every day of the year. There's very rarely an event that I'm at that there's not at least several other councillors also at. There are very many events that I'm not able to make that I know that other colleagues are covering. So I really don't think that a comment that we're not doing enough is justifiable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Agree with the comments made so far and appreciate Councillor Wood's annual rant on the subject. He's absolutely right. We do have some questions about the deep dive into the data. I think we all recognise the limitations there, and I think the officer presented that picture. But the trends are unmistakable and very disappointing. I think we've all stood to this report over the last few years and said exactly the same things. But I absolutely agree with Councillor Johnson's comment that this is part of a national picture and an international picture about decreasing trust in the institutions of government. We are not immune from that, however much we might like to be. I don't think we get yet to declare the independent Republic of Palmerston North. So bearing in mind that that is where we are, I'm very keen on this proposal from Councillor Barrett about focus group research, because I think the idea here is to enable us to have a deeper conversation and to access more rich data that actually teases out some of those tensions that came up in questions. I note, even in the comments that were appended into the report, people saying things like, my rates have gone up and I don't like it, but I want my water pipes fixing. So there is a tension there in all of it, and the understanding of what council does. There's so many comments about needing an increased police presence in the square, or wanting better public transport. Some of these things council can influence, but they're not our responsibility. And even with our really good comms programme on what council does, we seem to be screaming into the void on that one of explaining to people what council has responsibility for or doesn't have responsibility for. So I think the survey is good in what it tells us. There are concerning trends and none of us are looking away from that. But if we want to do something different, then maybe we have to do something different, and focus groups might provide a way to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Once again, it is always valuable when objective data confirms what we already know and what we're already hearing from our community. So it wasn't any surprise to me that value for money was the biggest overall satisfaction issue that people had, and that is it dropped to a very low level. And in terms of those top three concerns and priorities, the fact that the second and third one were around our spending decisions, around our rates being too high, and concerns around rates increases was not a surprise at all. And when I combine those two, that actually 39%, they're intrinsically, connected. So, I mean, the fact that they've been divided into two groups, that's a decision around how the categories work, but sometimes that can influence what sort of percentage they get. But when you look at those as a whole, that is the most significant feedback that people had in terms of what was concerning to them, and that's certainly not a surprise to me. In terms of the second recommendation, I'm very open to the idea of focus groups. What I'm not interested in is referring yet another additional budget to the annual budget process. Councillor Johnson said that we need to be clear about what we can influence and what we can't influence. What we can influence is how much we refer, on top of what is already a significantly increasing budget going into next year, how many additional requests we make to our Chief Executive. I'm much more interested in looking at what's important and looking at how we can utilise our existing resources to accommodate that, even if it means that less important things drop off. If focus groups were more important than this resident survey, then I'd be open to that. I do not want to add yet another additional budget to our already expanding budget. When we had a briefing, I heard the comment made that officers had found some extra dollars to bring the consultants there so that we could hear from them. I thought to myself, how much value was that really to spend the money in that way? That's an operational decision. I'm not meaning to specifically criticise that decision, but what I'm saying is there is room to accommodate different ideas in terms of the existing budget. We don't need to just, every time we have a good idea, suggest it's an additional budget. So I won't support this recommendation. If it fails, I would be happy to refer the idea of focus groups to the Chief Executive for consideration in terms of how that can be included within the existing resource. But I certainly don't wish to support yet another additional budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reading this report, I was taking it as a sort of a reflection on council performance to some extent, but also as a reflection on what it's like to be a resident of Palmerston North and what the experience of living here is like. And I think to Councillor Arnott's point, housing and inflation and just rapid change everywhere you look, and some of our long-held institutions, educational institutions going through periods of change and fluctuation, just the increase of gang presence and drugs in the 4412 has really significantly eroded the sense of safety and stability in Palmerston North, but I think more widely, as Councillor Johnson pointed out, in New Zealand, and that erosion of trust. And we here are accessible in ways that other groups that are contributing to the rise in cost of living are not, because a lot of people have to be price takers with insurance rises and electricity rises. If you've ever tried to take on a power company, I have, you get nowhere. But here, people could participate in the survey. They could sit there and chew us out if they want to, and we are accountable to that. And I think that's what's different, is that people in the community can still feel a sense of influence with us and still feel a sense of control, which is absent in many of the other places that are driving these cost of living rises for them. So while it might not be, it might be a tense relationship, but it's still a relationship, and we still are able to have some two-way conversation in ways that the community is not able to have with our other organisations. So I do value all the information in here. I also think, in terms of communications, I really welcome the exploration of focus groups. I mean, I was there for all the co-design in Featherston Street, and I don't know whether that helped us to a better outcome or not, but I do know that citizen panels are used to pretty good effect down in Horowhenua, so it could be something worth exploring to help us with the variety of things that we need to communicate about with our community. There's a huge variety of things that we need to consult and communicate and educate and inform, as Councillor Johnson pointed out. It's so difficult to achieve clarity and cohesion with those communications if they're across all these different formats, all different media, and targeting all these different audiences. I think that it's hard to build trust when we have to necessarily be quite disparate in the way we go about that. So very pleased to explore this as perhaps another way that we can continue that conversation with the community that they don't get with other proponents, and to see whether that can increase that sense of trust, or at least just a sense of two-way communication. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to conclude with the comments, I want to say that much of what you all said resonated with me. I mean, the fact about the methodology. Last week we had, for those who might be online or in the audience, we had the opportunity of having a briefing about this, and there were many questions that arose. I know that with surveys, the main thing is that we try and elicit information that we can do something with, hence the methodology and the way in which we do it. Those that we survey are really significant in terms of providing a fuller picture of what we have. I support the notion of looking at our local scene next to the national scene. I think that's really helpful. Last week I remember feeling that when I looked at this information, I thought, oh, and you're quite right, Councillor Barrett, it is something that concerns us when we see things going in a downward trend, particularly around trust or confidence and things. And I remember thinking, oh, does this reflect the mood of the nation? And that's where Councillor Johnson was, if I could say so, was alluding to, that there are some things out of our control that aren't really specific to what the decisions we make here and what we're confronted with. Councillor Hancock, his concerns around the eliciting feedback from different demographic groups and geographical and social spread was important, and I agree with that, hence the reason why I think that focus groups would be beneficial. I grew up in the environment that now is referred to as 442, but proudly Highbury, one of the originals, but very few of those that I grew up with, and even now, would probably engage in that kind of survey. There are different ways. We're so diverse that there are different ways that we need to elicit information from the different groups. And hence I think that that focus group research could be helpful. But anyway, I'm going to support both of these. I think that the results of that resident survey, we can't do anything. They are what they are. However, we do want to take note of those, and we do know what we want to see happen next time round. But I think that enough has been said by all of us. I think we've get the general gist. But I'm going to support 1 and 2, and now would like to call upon us all to vote. Yeah. Oh, we're happy to separate. Thank you, Councillor Naylor. More than happy to do that. So if we look at number 1, that the council know the results of the 2024 resident survey, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dennison. Can we please vote on that? Thank you. That has been passed 14-4. Have we lost someone? Oh yes, Councillor Harpeta is on council business. Ka pai. That's now we move on to number 2, that the council refer a budget for focus group research to the annual budget 2025 to 26 process, moved by Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Bowen. Please vote on that. Thank you. It's passed 10 votes to 3. Well, team, well done. It's now recess for the next 15 minutes, and then we will come back in. I'm just alerting to the fact that I may have to go, the CE and myself, to have a meeting at midday. So just alerting to the fact that if we don't finish before then I will ask that Councillor Dennison take over the role of chairing. Yes, Councillor Johnson.
May I suggest that we just continue, since we've only got one more item and the work schedule, and then just go to lunch, if other people agree?
I'm most agreeable to that.
I don't know.
Any opposition? Yes. Okay, thank you, Councillor Finlay. So, ka pai. Well, we're carrying on through. Well done, team. Okay, the next item, I'd like to call on our Pautoko Apure, Principal Māori Advisor, Pa Todd Taiapa, and Head of Events, Luke McEnroe. Thank you, Luke and Todd. And this is the late item pertaining to Toitu Te Tiriti Hikoe event, and it's pertaining to the level and nature of council support. It is a separate paper, and I'm going to hand this over to you. Thank you, Todd and Luke. Welcome.
Tēnā koe, mihi atu ki te haukainga o Rangitāne o Manawatu, nā koutou I karangi hia tēnei hui, tēnei kaupapa. Kia koe te kai katuarua, e te whaia, tēnā rā koe, kia koe kai kauni hera Fitzgerald, nau anō I whakawairu I tō tātou hui, tēnā rā koe. A koutou rā nā kai kauni hera, ki te tumu matua, te tira hautu o te kauni hera me nā kai mahi e hāpai I nei kaupapa o te rā, tēnā koutou huri no tēnā tātou katoa. The report before you, the memo, and appreciation for you accepting it onto the agenda today as a late item. It's in response to a request by our partners Rangitāne o Manawatu for additional support to assist them as primary hosts of a major hiko event in the middle of November. And we're seeking, or officers are seeking direction in this report to clarify as early as possible some direction as to the level and nature of support to be provided. You'll see there's a list of itemised costings there that would be associated with elevating some of our support for this event. Officers do see a benefit in us being able to work closely with Rangitane and agency partners in this hosting element. There are extremely large number of visitors potentially coming to the city. It would be a positive way to support Rangitane in terms of them receiving the mauri of this hikoi as it traverses the North Island, arrives here, and then ultimately moves on the following day. And we believe there's opportunities to maximise the manuhiri having a safe and a positive experience of Papaioia while they are within the city. Staff contribution will be managed through existing budget, as well as some of those itemised costs for some of the other options. The final option is really around in particular the presence that our elected members and leadership might have in relationship, particularly to the pōwhiri aspect, in terms of welcoming this large number of manuhiri, the receipt of the mauri in relationship to this event. But the nature of that representation would be something decided ultimately between our leadership here in Rangitane. I would finally just note one editorial. There's some elements here have been moving pretty quickly, and on in under 1.2 there's just a sentence which I'd ask you to put aside. So it says the gathering will remain on Te Maraehine into the Saturday evening. So that's not accurate, and it doesn't reflect the content further on. At this stage, an initially planned event to be held on Te Maraehine is no longer to occur. So what's called referred to as a peace concert element, that will no longer be occurring, and the plan at this stage from organisers is to move participants from Te Maraehine to another staging place, which at this stage is probably towards Monrad Park, and that's more about into the evening, not necessarily as an event at this point. So I think that's our words of introduction. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, thank you. Luke, do you want to say anything to that? Okay. Questions? Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm just interested, usually in a report where there's options, there's a chart that outlines risks of each option. I just couldn't find that included in this report, and I'm just wondering if there have been any risks identified with any or all of the options outlined.
Yeah, I think probably the risk of option one in terms of maintaining a distance from the kaupapa. I think that's been identified, but quite rightly, Councillor, not specifically and directly in relationship to that list of items. Of one, what it would communicate to AOE partners in terms of the nature of the relationship and how we respond to situations like this. And the other element is because there's a lot of unknowns about this event, as a view from the officers, that certainly having some involvement in the organising aspects, having a presence on the ground, not necessarily in relationship to directly supporting the kaupapa, but supporting I would say the manaakitanga aspects, does give us, I think, better knowledge and better ability to respond to the dynamics of an event like that. As we go into the second element, which is more about us kind of not working, sorry, I'll just take a breath and recast this. Officers don't see a high risk in that role of working in with our partners. We have trusted relationships, we work with them very closely. The risk assessment being done on the event in terms of the size and the diversity of people who will attend, with multiple interests and perspectives, is something that's being managed very actively. There's very close working relationships with the police throughout the planning and the journey of this hikoi. And a lot of our community groups are very keen to be more actively involved in the manakitanga aspects. So staff being present and involved, we don't have any sense at the moment that there's any additional risk in that. In fact, probably the opposite. The third option, it's really a leadership position. I mean, obviously, elected members, senior managers and rangitane work together very often and are alongside each other in tikanga and in other working dynamics. In this situation, rangitane are, as per the tikanga for the hikoi, they receive the mauri and are leading the hosting for the hikoi as it is within our region. And I'm sure we'll be working with other iwi in the region as part of that hosting. And it's really a question for the councillors, the elected members, as to whether providing the support for them to express that tikanga is the way to demonstrate the partnership, or whether I guess what we're talking about is potentially being alongside rangitane in the pōwhiri process itself. There are different roles that can be. That can be a role of support. There can be speaking roles. At this stage, I think it's likely the pōwhiri will be within Te Reo Māori and Tikanga Māori, and will be led by those from iwi. And I don't understand there's any aspects within the pōwhiri for, we could call it broader speech making. And we're not aware at the moment of any follow-up events. So relatively low risk, our involvement would be our assessment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua. Just wanting to hear a bit more about the move to Monrad Park in the evening. Just curious about moving a large number of people from a CBD into a residential area, and whether that been considered.
I'll take that one. So, as Todd had said, this is a moving target at the moment. Discussions have been had mainly around moving people away from Te Maraehine because it's not an appropriate space to do the evening hosting side of things. So one idea is a space at Monrad near the Highbury Whānau Centre. There are other ideas, so as they become clearer, they would be communicated to you all. But yes, that is definitely a concern of ours as well. Impact on residents in residential spaces for large gatherings.
Thank you. And also just noted, on the same day, we have a city welcoming pōwhiri scheduled that morning, and it just seems there's some correlation in terms of showing manaakitanga and whanaungatanga to our manuhiri or our new residents. And I just wondered whether that has factored in the conversations, and that there's other activities happening in the city that day which could potentially be symbiotic.
I'll initially respond. So we've spoken to Rangitane about that event, and they still wish that to go forward as planned. So that should be completed, I guess, about lunchtime, and we're expecting the core of the hikoi to begin arriving late that afternoon. So Rangitane have committed to continue with that. There are other events. One of the major ones is a stock car event. So in terms of just traffic movement and managing that, we're aware that's a major issue. There's a lot of effort going into the traffic management plan. I think there's quite a bit of impressive work that the Māori Wardens are doing in terms of leading that. We have our own experts in that room, and the police are very actively involved as well. So and that will clearly be a key element. One is the arrival of the hikoi into the city and how that is managed, and then how do we sort of expedite people being able to move out of that space in a clear kind of a corridor where they can be safe, but also to have a plan that can then be communicated to business owners and other community people who may be affected.
Thank you. But there's no sort of current way thinking about the correlation between those events happening on the same day and any, you know, for residents of the city who might like to take an involvement in either.
Not directly, I would say that in a similar way to how the last event flowed into the raising of the Te Reo Māori flag for Te Wiki o Te Reo. So that alignment was, I'm quite sure it will be part of the welcoming event, and given clarity in what the messaging is in terms of that event, the ability for that community to later in the day decide to participate or not. So yeah.
Get smart about. Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to the outline of costs, which seemed pretty moderate actually, was there thought around contingency for wet weather in regards to additional costs for marquees or any other needs if weather turned poor?
Not at present. The kind of gist of the whole report is our supporting role. So a lot of that guidance around the actual event management is from the Hikoi organisers themselves. They haven't indicated any wet weather options at this point. We have raised it as an option, so we haven't included that in the costing at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was the end of questions. Thank you, Todd and Luke. Much appreciated. And I invite you to take a seat. Kia ora, Councillor Johnson. Are you wanting to move something? Or a comment?
I'm happy to move something, or alternatively, I'm happy to second something if it's what I was going to move anyway. Or in the case that someone is moving and seconding it, I'm happy to comment.
I think we've been sitting far too long. I'm happy to move 1C, and Councillor Hancock has supported that. And now I'll pass it over to Councillor Johnson, comment? And 2, sorry. Yes, happy to. I think, you know, this is a huge kaupapa for Rangitane to host people from other iwi coming here to our whenua. And hosting, how we host them is really significant. And when you don't host appropriately, it's not good. You know, there is reputational damage, or there is reputational enhancement. And there's also about one of the big things for us at Rangitane value is manaakitanga, looking after those people who come to our city. And as Todd had mentioned, we want them to have a positive experience, and one where they are safe at all times. Where possible, we look after everyone, regardless of who they are. That manaakitanga is really strong. And there will be many, many people who will be here. Probably, you know, we haven't seen that number of people other than when we had Te Matatini many years ago, of which I was one of the members on the organising committee, and we were at the showgrounds. And to host that many people, to welcome them in a ceremonial way through pōhiri requires significant logistics in terms of, like, culturally, how many kai karanga, because you have the kai karanga, the first one to make the call out to welcome them, then the kai kōrero and all those other things. So it is about Rangitane putting our best foot forward, but we need support to do that. given the numbers of people, given the kaupapa, and we do want it to be a positive experience. We want it to be uplifting for everyone. It's less than 24 hours of hosting them because they're moving on further. I think that Todd and Luke had, at short notice, had put this forward really well and spoke to those issues. So I'm hoping that people will support to show that the partnership is one of where we can have reciprocity and work together. Kia ora. Councillor Johnson.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Definitely, I'm very, very supportive of this option of partnering. And I think it would be remiss of us to do anything less, to be quite honest. We've signed a kawanata. We are partners with Rangatane. Our partners have asked for assistance, and I think it's not even a second thought that I would give to not providing it, to be perfectly honest. I'm not even 100% why it needed to come through council, because I think it's very much in line with what we would want to do. But in any case, it's an opportunity to publicly state our support for our partners Rangatane in hosting this very significant event, actually, very significant. And I do hope that we'll be able to, as many as can attend and show our support as treaty partners, because this isn't just about Māori doing this, Rangatane doing this on their own. It's got to be done, well, I say it's got to be, that sounds a bit rude. I believe that these things are better done hand in hand. We're trying to demonstrate that we support Te Tiriti, and Te Tiriti is a partnership. So I just think it's, as the Mayor would say, it's a no-brainer to support this. So I have confidence that you will all support it as well, actually, and I hope it's really successful, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Councillor. Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also going to support this, and understanding our relationship and wanting to support the hosting of something like this practically. The people are going to be coming here anyway, and it's much better to do this better than not, to be a silent partner. And my thoughts were just around, even having the experience of the weekend we've just had with the weather being so unpredictable, that there would be a prudent nature to be aware that there should be some contingencies around some shelter and cover if we're still having a poor footy and the weather's not great. And that would be an expectation that I would think that would be reasonable to have included, and just to be upfront so we're not having to cover bases retrospectively. And I see this as a relationship and fully support it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you and others have very well covered the event and the rationale around supporting it, etc. I think it is a very significant event. It will rise to prominence in the histories of this nation, and it's only appropriate that we as a council are active in that partnership. My main thing that I wanted to comment on was to thank the Chief Executive and officers. So as I understand it from reading the report, this is like only 20 days old, which is less than 3 weeks. That is council moving at approaching the speed of light in local government terms. So thank you for moving with speed to actually bring this here, and that we can get behind this fully. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I quite agree that that's sort of akin to bureaucratic light speed. I think with thinking back on my 2 years here now in terms of the rural games and the Spanish women's football team, our own inaugural meeting of council, there are just countless examples of times where Rangitane have enhanced our mana as hosts by their presence and their partnership, and what an honour to have the chance to lend what mana we have to our partners as they step up to host these many thousands of manuhiri to our home. This is a great opportunity to walk the talk of our partnership, which, given the kaupapa of the event, is very fitting. But also, we do events really well here. We have so much logistical expertise in our team that we can give. So let's make the party stopover a real highlight to do whatever we can to support our partners as they undertake this quite intimidating but very exciting opportunity. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Sibel. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Kia ora tātou, tēnā koe. So just to carry on, thank you colleagues in anticipation of your support and even to all my other colleagues who might think differently. As I've always said, I have a huge respect for each and every one of you. To Councillor Dennison, just to share with everybody as the organisers start to unpack and pull things together, I think we've rallied 37 marquees to date from around the wider region that Rangitane, Raukawa and other iwi purchased during the COVID pandemic, so they're all on board, just trying to find enough trucks to get them here. So all that sort of stuff in terms of contingency is well underway. I just wanted to highlight also and acknowledge our tangata tiriti whānau. So those are all the non-Rangitane, even non-Māori community, definitely here in Palmerston North, but also throughout Aotearoa, who are also in support of what the Māori communities are doing around the country. The treaty is obviously the basis of this hiko in 1975. You'll all remember when Whenua marched from the far north at age 79, and this is a repeat of the same sentiment in that regard. So for all of your support, thank you very much. Kia ora.
Kia ora, and I don't have a right of reply other than to say ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you everyone for your comments. And now if we could go to the vote, thank you. Thank you. That has been passed with 12 votes in support and 2 against. We have now concluded that section. And before we move on, I know that the CE and myself have to vacate and go to a meeting, a council-related meeting, and I'd like to move a motion that Councillor Dennison take over as the chair. Sorry, fine. Oh, thank you. Oh, everyone says, look, go with the work schedule. Okay. Promise it's not going to go on for long? Okay. Thank you for that, though, Councillor Naylor. Thank you for that. Looks like we're going to move with some speed. Thank you. Rightio. Here we go.
Items on here. As you know, we're trying to move some things, give you some space around budget deliberations. So there are a few items. The Māori Award referendum, looking to bring that to the 6th of November meeting. There's a couple of other items that are annual review of delegations, suggesting that might go to Strategy and Finance Committee. There are also item 10, delivery model options for property, CCO trust, etc. Looking to have that go to a workshop on the 13th of November 1st, and then some decisions out of beyond that. And also the local water done well, as you know, and thank you again in advance, and apologies in advance for shoving in another meeting for you to look at local water done well on the 5th of December. You're all wonderful people. Just recorded.
Thank you, Wade. Councillor Naylor.
Sorry, just two things that you said were quite different to what's on our papers. I think you said that Māori Ward referendum implications would go to the 6th of November, is that correct?
That's correct.
So is our papers wrong where it says 11th of December?
No, well, this was produced, obviously this agenda was produced before some of these changes have started to occur. Yeah.
Oh, so those will change. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we have myself moving this recommendation and Councillor Dennison seconding. Thank you, Councillor. That the Council receive its work schedule dated the 30th of October 2024. No further questions nor comments. Can I please invite you to vote on this? That is passed unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. And with that, I would like to invite Councillor Fitzgerald to conclude with a karakia. Tēnā koe pā.
Kia ora tātou, tēnā koe anō, me karakia tātou. Ka puta ki te whai au, ki te auroma, whakamaua kia tīna,
Tīna.
haumi e hui e.
Tai ki e. Thank you very much, everyone, to the elected members, to the officers. That concludes this part. We have Rangitane o Manawatu Committee later on in the afternoon, and then the Rangitane elected members catch up. You are all most welcome.